bringing sexy back. I can't finish that.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to IRENCAST. I'm your host, Jeff, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Alan. And Mona. Mona, welcome to the show once
What's
again.
Up, guys?
Coming in for a visit. On the first and third Tuesday of every month, we bring to you our perspectives on theology and culture from a post-evangelical lens. Thank you for joining us for another conversation to provoke your progressive Christian imagination. This week, like we said at the top of the show, we have Mona back with us for a conversation and a topic that she recommended, and we just thought would be great. And any opportunity, obviously, to have Mona back on the show whenever she wants is a pure joy for all of us here. But we're going to be talking about Christian hegemony and Christian leadership and all that kind of stuff and how that's affected our current political landscape. And for our segment this week, we are going to be having a good old-fashioned round of pursuit of the trivial and catching up a little with Mona and finding out how things are going with her. So let's get this thing started. Mona, first of all, again, we're super excited to have you here. And why don't you go ahead and frame this conversation, this topic for us so we can get into it.
So if you're like me and you have a lot of different political views around the dinner table at the holidays, you might have gotten into some interesting conversations about different things with different people in your family, like I did. And that's what my inspiration was for this conversation. And I used the word in a conversation with some of my, my close friends and family, the word hegemony. And that's not a word a lot of people have in their normal vocabulary. So let me just define it really quickly. Hegemony is the dominance or leadership of one country or social group over another. And I used it in the context of trying to define for someone that we live in a hegemonic Christian nation as far as the culture and legal perspective. So that person was like, oh, that's a funny word. And I find the word really helpful. It doesn't. So hegemony is defining who is kind of deciding, who gets to decide culturally and politically for the rest of the population. And you could also kind of frame that in terms of normativity. Who gets to decide what's normal, what's truth, what's common sense, and what's natural. That is the dominant group. And that you could say is the hegemonic group, especially if there are systems in place to enforce that person's dominance or that social group's dominance in society. So there's a lot of big words, but I find that word really helpful to describe how I feel, even as a post-evangelical, non-religious person now, that there is, especially in the current administration, a really big idea floating around conservative right-wing circles that basically this ought to be a Christian nation, or it is a Christian nation, and we have to get back. We have to make America great again, meaning get back to the point when Christianity was a very hegemonic, very dominant force, and that Christianity is the most common sense, and that it should be the norm.
There are different ways at arriving at hegemony, but the idea is that enforce what is the deciding group that is in control. And you can influence culture in a bunch of different ways, but Christian hegemony seeks to get that from one route or another. So there's kind of people all over the landscape as to how you do that. But yeah, that's a big topic right now in a lot of the circles that I run into.
Well, absolutely. I mean, America is like a big experiment in this one subject, and you can kind of understand political divides and social divides in our country, like, to me, on this one topic alone. Should Christianity be hegemonic or not? And when I say hegemonic, a lot of, that word carries a bit of a negative weight to it, right? It's an intense word. It's kind of an accusation. It doesn't necessarily mean that the hegemonic group is bad or evil. So I want to really make that distinction. So if you're listening to this and you tend to lean conservative right wing, when I say this word, I don't mean that it's a reign of terror, right? I'm not saying that. I'm saying that it is a dominant, and there could be.
I think that's the clarification I was trying to make. Is there different ways to approach and arrive at being the hegemon? But, but it still is in force. It is a forceful thing. So it does have a negative connotation, whether you have good ideals or not.
And to be quite frank, and again, I'll just jump in there and say what's on my mind without any real consequence for it. But The idea of any one philosophy, any one type of leadership being dominant for any long, lengthy period of time without any room for anyone else is bad, is destructive.
Well, depending on who you ask. If you ask the right wing, they don't believe that. They think a biblical theology, a theocracy is best for our country, and they believe that that's how the country was founded and that's the way it ought to be, and we should get rid of any view that threatens that. And a lot of right-wing people really embrace Trump. They know he's not a good person. This is kind of the myth that floats around liberal circles that like evangelicals have kind of just like started changing their morality or things like that. I think if you ask most evangelicals, they would say he's not a moral leader. He's not an upstanding person. He's kind of a necessary evil in order to restore Christian hegemony to the country. They believe that this should be a Christian nation, and they think Trump is restoring that. So that's interesting.
So there's a partnership there of two different things. And that's happened in history. You look at like Geneva, or God, I hate going to the Hitler thing, but there's been like Christian nationalists in all these different nations who partner with the more rigorous, heavy-handed governments to get their agenda pushed forward. And so those partnerships are like, there's antecedents all throughout history, since especially the time of the Reformation. But
exactly. So this is not unprecedented what's happening. And I think the left is kind of baffled to understand that the curious, strange bedfellows of those two groups, the Trump camp and the right wing. And to me, this kind of helps me understand the glue between the two. That Christian nationalists oftentimes are also Zionists. They want to restore the New Jerusalem. They want to bring about the second coming, and they think that Trump is helping that happen. That's an interesting perspective. And I think, in order to really engage people in the right wing, you need to really start from those assumptions to have a conversation at all, because that's what they believe. So
to understand why people believe that and how it functions.
And they're so passionate about restoring Christian secular dominance that they will go to great lengths to do so. And for them, a lot of them, that includes, the single issue voting of abortion, because abortion to them is like, that's the common sense thing that they think Christianity supports, right? That should be enforced for everybody. No holds barred.
But then there's also LGBTQ rights, right? And then education, like speaking about creation science in schools and stuff like that. There's all of those fall under this purview.
Yeah. So the question is, should this be a Christian nation? And I have, people near and dear to my heart in my personal life who really genuinely believe that it should be. And I think they're very well meaning, like I said, Christianity, to say Christianity is hegemonic doesn't necessarily mean Christianity is bad. You can certainly have a benevolent hegemon. Right, you can have someone who's well-intentioned and who means well. They think that the moral fiber of the nuclear family is slipping away from our fingers, and we have to get it back, and we have to preserve. We have to conserve, hence the name conservative. We have to conserve the moral fiber of society, and we do that through Christian values and biblical morals. Right.
And getting Christian leaders elected and influencing local city governments through targeted donations. And like, I'd love to delve into some of that eventually. I'll let you talk a little more, but it's happening.
Or that social safety programs shouldn't exist, that churches and nonprofits should do all of that work.
That's a very common argument.
It's a very common argument. And so I think, it's unfortunate that the right gets pegged as uncompassionate when really they just want to decentralize. They want to do the same work and take care of the poor, but they want to decentralize that work. And I think there's a lot of problems with that, which could be a whole conversation into itself. But it's just a different vision of how the country should operate. So it's funny to me that when you really dig deep, I think the left and right has some really critical things in common. Both want a functioning, positive, healthy society. It's just a different vision of what that looks like and how that comes to be.
One's pluralistic and one is much more conformed.
Hegemonic. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So the question is, should this be a Christian nation? Was this a Christian nation from its founding? And here's my answer to this. And I would love to get your perspective, because I'm sure you both have heard this growing up, right? I mean, I heard this so much growing up. America is a Christian nation. Did you both hear that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we have the flag. I thought my church was intense. We had flags in our sanctuary. We like stood up the soldiers who were going to go to war for the United States and prayed for them and sent them off. And like all of my friends joined the military. But I saw videos of your guys' church growing up.
We had confetti and patriotic music, and
we had a 4th of July musical with sequins and American eagles flying.
And man, you hear, especially on the news now, like, you know, praying and prophesying over the different people who are going to be elected, like Roy Moore, right? Really funny aside, the author of Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling, she was like, in narrator's voice, Roy, you know, the Roy Moore camp was right. God was in control. They just didn't realize she was a black woman. I was like, that's so freaking funny. But yeah, it's alive and well today. And I think it was alive for our backgrounds.
Yeah. And I think we should definitely talk about the fear of Christians losing political power and social power is very pervasive and I think stoked by a lot of factors, including right-wing media, right? Like if Christians aren't in control and they lose hegemonic power, then they'll be persecuted like Rome. And pretty soon we're going to have people like burning Christians for torches like Nero, right?
And bigger than that, more people will go to hell if Christians are not in control. That's like kind of the thought pattern.
I don't agree with those beliefs, but I can understand that if you do believe it, that's scary as heck, and you wouldn't want that to happen, right? So there's positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement happening at the same time. Positive reinforcement, we get to save the world. Negative reinforcement, we're preventing something really horrible from happening. So it's a dual function. Okay, so is the U.S. a Christian nation? I think historically, you can argue very strongly yes, but also way more no. Let me explain. Okay, so the U.S. colonies were founded by religious refugees, and it was by region, right? So New England, everyone's very familiar with the Puritans who moved to New England and founded what they called a city on a hill, a New Jerusalem, that would be a light for all other nations, that would be a pure religious order society, a society that was theocratic based on religious ideals. And the Puritans were refugees, religious refugees from England, where they felt like the Anglican Church was too Catholic and was losing its religious fire and its religious oomph. So they moved across an ocean before GPS and before you had ocean liners and any technology. They got on a boat and traveled 2 months and like settled in swampland. You know, like that's amazing that you would want that much religious freedom, that you would go to those lengths. You know, in Pennsylvania, Lutherans were fleeing Germany because of religious persecution. Interestingly, Jews from Dutch Brazil, so Amsterdam, Dutch settled Brazil, parts of Brazil, and Jewish refugees started immigrating away from Brazil because there was too much religious persecution in Brazil. So Jews moved to the U.S. Before this U.S., this is the colonies, moved to the colonies to flee persecution. Quakers were refugees from Puritanism. So in Puritan New England, a little bit later, Puritanism started feeling religiously confining. Quakers moved away from New England and started their own colonies because they wanted religious freedom. Catholics emigrated to Maryland because they were rejecting Anglicanism because Anglicanism in England was too Protestant and not Catholic enough. So they felt persecuted. So if you see the U.S. colonies, the founding of the U.S. colonies by region as different groups of people seeking religious shelter, the Constitution makes way more sense. Mm-hmm. Right? So
I think it's important to just point out, it's not that they just felt persecuted. There were laws enacted against them. And so there were fines and penalties and imprisonment and all sorts of stuff if you practiced your religion. So yeah,
that persecution was real. I'm not trying to make light of it. Absolutely.
No, I just wanted to clarify that.
They were persecuted. They were. And on the other side, they wanted to try to create a new system of society where they would have more freedom to practice their religious beliefs. Okay. So by the time you had 13 colonies settled, 1787 rolls around, and you have a movement called the Federalist Movement, which is saying, hey, we would be stronger if we joined forces and stood up to Britain and other imperialist powers because they're taxing us without representation. This is all going to sound familiar from your 8th grade civics class, and we can form our own society that would be better. But oh my gosh, we have so much religious diversity here in the U.S. All of these Christian sects, Christian groups, had very different visions of what religion should look like or how society should run. So hence the Constitutional Convention of coming together, creating this political order, gluing all of these jagged pieces that don't naturally fit together and have had conflict in and of themselves. Like getting the Quakers to play nice with the Puritans, that's a feat. They don't agree on a lot of things. That's why Jefferson and some of our quote unquote founding fathers, which a lot of the religious right likes to speak about in glowing terms of like, these are our Christian founding fathers. They've founded the country based on Christian principles. Well, in a sense, yes, because that was kind of what they were working out of was, sort of a philosophical, as far as like, Kant and the history of philosophy and Christianity. In a sense, they were working out of a Christian understanding, but Christian meaning many, many different forms of Christianity and interpretations of the Bible and interpretations of history. They've got together, and Jefferson expressed the sentiment of that Constitutional Convention and that early work on building the United States of America was the sentiment of it was separation of church and state for the purposes of religious freedom. Jefferson would go on to write what's called the Jefferson Bible, which a lot of conservatives don't like to talk about, because here was this guy who is a quote unquote Christian founding father who sliced up about, half to more than half of the Bible. He took out all the miraculous stuff that didn't make sense to his logical mind out of the Bible and made his own sort of Frankenstein Bible that would be a moral exemplar instead of a supernatural tome, a supernatural writ or canon. So when the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, all of these people writing these words and signing their names on this had these rich memories and recent memories of being religiously persecuted and not having their freedom in society. So that it's coming out of a place of pain and hurt and that memory of not having power, right? So
an entire continent of a couple hundred years of wars fought by different religious nationalistic groups. Like that was Europe's pedigree, right? For 1500s, 1600s. And so they're coming out of that war-torn area where church and state just caused so much heartache and death and turmoil.
Right, exactly. In England, where the king or queen of England is literally the head of the Anglican Church. I've been watching a lot of The Crown lately. It's very good. They get to decide what the theology is because they have this idea of divine right passed through the head of state. So not only did the U.S. colonies not have a monarchy, but they said, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. They didn't say establishment of a Christian sect. They said the establishment of religion, to incorporate, for example, Jews who are living as their neighbors who wanted to be involved in this great experiment of the United States of America. So what is Christian? So let me ask you, like hearing early United States history founded that way, do you think it's fair to still define this as a Christian nation?
Yes and no. I think the problem is it was a Christian nation in the sense that you have all these different versions of Christianity, and they can say that they, or we can look at the history books and say, yeah, there was Jewish colonies and all that kind of stuff, but for all intents and purposes, there was still a heavy dose of anti-Semitism within the founding of our country, and it was still very much a way to include all forms of Christianity. And maybe I'm just over cynical about all of that. And then also you have to, it's difficult and it gets muddy is because when people are saying it's a Christian nation, that we are founded on a Christian nation, they are discounting a large portion of Christianity as not Christian when they say that word. Right. And then they're also capitalizing on the whole revolutionary religious persecution feeling that the Constitution was based off of, because they attribute them to the same as the founding fathers, is that we are escaping our own persecution today. I mean, they're taking those ideas of persecution in Christianity and they're super and hyper defining what those mean for them in the context today, and then just, going with it full board and not with very little concern for anyone else.
I think that you can point to all of those people, those men, right, who signed their name to that statement that Congress shall not make a law respecting religion. And in the sense, you're saying on paper, in word, that it's not a Christian nation, but indeed it actually is. And like functionally it was. all of those men went on to write different things that said it was a Christian nation. You know, all of their writings and their thought patterns and processes, even though they agreed to that, their influence pushed a lot of oppression of non-Christian ideas, especially in the colonization of the native tribes, right?
Oh, definitely.
Of indigenous people. There was a sense that if you're going to become American, you're going to be baptized. The functional relationship between the state and the government, there's this mutual respect, but they're melded together on the frontier, right? The state and the church are one thing when it comes to outside people groups. So maybe in word, there's this idea that it's not a Christian nation, at least in that one instance, but in function, it very much was.
And then depending upon your definition of Christian, it's either a good thing or a bad thing.
I would be like, it's not actually Christian.
Right.
Christian
so the Christians that linked arm in arms in Charlottesville a few months ago, if that's your definition of Christianity, then I would say absolutely we're a Christian nation. And that's a good thing, and we should move forward in that mode or that spirit of Christianity.
You're talking about
I'm talking about like the idea of inclusivity and justice for everyone, regardless of, color, creed, or all the things that inspire this podcast and our expression of Christianity.
Well, I'm uncomfortable with that though, because if you're defining Christianity like just a moral code of like kind of universal values, but you're still kind of pasting that term Christianity over maybe people who wouldn't want to identify that way. So
that's why I want to point toward the history of the Anabaptists. There has been a history of people who have defined themselves against hegemony. People who refuse to take state power, refuse to do that, and saw themselves
like Mennonites,
as a countercultural movement, and that was their reading and interpretation of Christianity. And I have a lot of feeling toward that. So
well, and I didn't just to clarify, I wasn't saying I was using that as a rhetorical kind of thing of saying that there's a wide path of Christianity. There's a different thing meant by Christian. When you say the word Christian, what are you saying? And I think that to say that the people who were on the frontier colonizing people were Christian, for some of us is almost painful, because you're like, well, if it's not Christian indeed, then it's not Christian at all. You can't baptize someone and murder their family and say you did the Christian thing, because that's not what that is for some of us, especially for people like Anabaptists who were burned at the stake by Calvinists and other people, that's but there is a historical and antecedent to resisting the hegemony.
Sure. Yeah. And that's why this conversation about hegemony is so important and goes so deep, because before you even get to the United States being colonized, that word colonization is incredibly important, right? Because the history of the West has been a history of missionizing and colonization and colonialism, and in many cases forced missionizing,
literally changing people's names, the names of their cities and their own
torturing them, or torturing them. I visited a fort in Cuba with my graduate program. We did a religion and politics tour of Cuba. It's incredibly eye-opening. We visited a fort where they had preserved as a museum all these torture chambers, making people sit on hot coals and horrible things, pulling off toes and things until they converted to Christianity. Seriously, and that's part of the history of the West itself. So when you're saying that the U.S. is a Christian nation, because the West has been colonized and missionized as Christian to begin with.
And so Christians today would say oh, that's not us. We would never do that. That's not the Christian thing to do. And it's well, then you have now lost your right to say that this is a Christian nation if you don't own that that's the history of what it was. If you're going to say Christian nation, you're calling into the present this whole past of colonization that was very
and the fact
brutal.
That Christianity had to be forced through many societies like a ramrod, and in that time, before technology, before you had infrastructure, right? Imagine getting on a boat, going to a new place, setting up a new society, and that whole society in general, all of its laws are wrapped up in a certain religion. If you decide to go against the religious order and you get banished, it means you actually die. There's nowhere else to go. This happened a lot in the Salem witch trials, and women who wouldn't confess to being witches, were banished and just sent into the wilderness because when your livelihood is completely contingent on the religious order, literally, it's hard to say that people are choosing choosing out of their own free will that religious structure.
Right. And well, and not only that, but you're
that.
still operating in a way of colonization. You're committing cultural colonization all the time as far as dictating who, the backlash against PC culture and stuff like that. But it's still the same thing reversed, is dictating things you can and cannot say. Like when we had the recent words that were banned when it came to the budget administration of the CDC, and don't say this, don't say that. They were banned they weren't officially banned, but they were suggested not to use in their budget information or whatever.
Yeah, because it wouldn't go over well to use the word.
Exactly. But even still, the way in our culture and media, the way that people who ascribe to this being a Christian nation in the quote unquote traditional sense, they're committing a form of colonization with the way that they approach culture and say, this is how we should behave in this situation and all that kind of stuff. So I don't think just because you didn't participate in a form of colonization that happened, a couple hundred years ago, it doesn't mean you're not in that same way and in that same mode.
That's actually the point that I wanted to make, Jeff, like right there toward the end of the conversation. And I might as well just jump on it right now, is that when people speak of creating, so they call it dominion theology now, like present tense right now, there are Christians who believe in dominion theology, and that is that Christians should take over all these different aspects of culture and they should create the hegemony through good means, elections, donations, good work, that kind of stuff. And then they get to influence all of society. And it's like, still, they would say that they are spreading love, that their love for people is putting them in a situation where they're more likely to encounter Christ because society's increasingly Christian, where they're not allowed to get married to someone of their same biological sex because that's a sin against God. And so real love is not allowing people to do evil. It's like making this whole place a Christian nation. And what I would say to them is what you just said, Jeff. You are loving in the way of empire. You are loving in the way of Christianity with quotes that has been melded since especially the time of Constantine, but especially through the European Reformation, is that love for you means I am going to control you. And I would say that totally smacks against the operation of Jesus, especially in like the book of Mark or in the Gospels, where it's like, no, it's not melding with empire. It's not fighting wars against empire. It's this total different way of being in relation to the world. And so like, it's unfortunate. I would say that it's not love. It's not real friendship to resist pluralism in a society. You know what I mean? Like you're not listening to people. You're not being with people. And that transgresses the heart of, to me, the gospel. But that's a very different vision than some Christians operate under currently that Mona's bringing up.
Well, yeah, and it seems like to me, if you have to spend all your time being so worried that you're losing your place in society or your influence, then maybe you're doing something wrong, or you're like your ideology is just not that good. Like maybe your theology is not that good.
That fear is actually what it is. There's a fear that it can't stand up in the marketplace of ideas, and so we have to tell everyone to shut the hell up so that we can. Because I actually did a thought experiment one time, and I asked people in my family and other people, say there was a mall and all these different storefronts were different religions. Would your church rent out one of them? It's like a religious mall. So it's all these different churches and temples and mandirs and stuff. Would you rent out one of the spaces? And person after person was like, heck no, I would never give my money to something that would create space for all those different ideas. And I'm like, that's the idea that people function under, is that there should be no other voices but the Christian one.
So do I hear you saying that you're advocating for a free market of ideas, Alan?
Yes. I believe that and I believe this personally in kind of like a mystic way.
But we'll all be Satanists if that happens.
I know, right? I shouldn't be scared of truth. Like the truth was true before I was born. It'll be true when I die, and I'm just getting to know it. And God's not scared of it, and it should be able to stand on its own. Nothing that is worthwhile in my life requires me to kill someone or silence someone or tell someone else to think the exact way that I do for me to value it. And so I think if Christianity
people today wouldn't want to kill other people,
but they would want to enact laws. But they would want to enact laws that force them to break up their families. Like there's right. Real things, you know?
That's the difference, right? It's like it's great and fine and good to be a social transformer and to influence people culturally. Yes.
Through invitation and example. That's how my
conversation
Christianity. Yes.
And love. That's great. That's the good news. You know, all power to you. But if you're going to start using the shared systems that our collective taxes pay for, like our political system and our legislative branch, to start enforcing your moral order, then that's where it gets into the hegemonic.
I have sympathy for the Anabaptists who enact their religion by like doing political stunts since the 1500s, right? They resist, like they get arrested because they're anarchists and they're disrupting the peace, like doing these stunts to unmask like some of the cultural and structural evils. I'm totally down with that. That goes past listening and being, a loving space to have different things. Like there's a prophetic element to that, and I'm totally down with. But that is so different than like Bethel, Northern California. In April of last year, this is a giant megachurch. I'd like to talk about this in the future, or in just a few minutes, about their 7 mountain mandate. But they have like a mandate, right, to control the different spheres of humanity: family, church, education, media, economy, government. Like if you can control all these different things, you can then make it a Christian nation. They gave $500,000 to the city of Reading to assist in the funding for police officers. And their specific goal is to control culture and society. And they're making massive donations to law enforcement in their town. And it's like at once you could just be like, oh, that's a good thing. Or sorry, that's probably a tangent. But I think there's real consequences to that kind of theology.
Donating is donating, though. I mean, you can donate to whoever you want. That's perfectly... I mean, well, okay, so then when it comes to the Koch brothers and like buying elections, I don't know. Okay, so maybe I take that back. But yeah, no, people have a right to vote with their money, I think, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Sure.
Well, I would push back a little bit on this idea of the free market of ideas, because I don't think it's that simple when it comes from an evangelical perspective, because you're not dealing with a one idea that's better than the other. You're dealing with this underlining theological idea that people at their core are bad. So if you give them a free expression of something that appeals to their immoral nature, like all the other ideas, then you're, like you said before, Alan, you're not loving them. So for us, it's an easy issue of let's have a free market of ideas. But for us, the idea of allowing people to succumb to their, human wilds and temptation and all that kind of stuff, that's not intermixed so heavily in the way that we would approach in an exchange of ideas. And I think that that's what makes it more difficult to have an exchange of ideas.
And we don't have this sense of imminence that Jesus' return is imminent and society is getting increasingly wicked. And if you have that underlying belief, that's going to completely shape the way you see, the need for the return of order, so that we don't turn into Sodom and Gomorrah and get fried by divine lightning.
There's a big movement right now that puts into practice what you just said. So, Dominion theology, there's subsets like Bethel or Kingdom Now is one of those two. The New Apostolic Reformation. And interestingly enough, one of the leaders of YWAM, you guys know YWAM, Youth with a Mission?
Yeah.
Or Cru. The
Crusade for Christ.
Yeah, Crusaders, right? Campus Crusade. The founders of those started this like idea a while ago, the one that I mentioned, the 7 mountain mandate thing, and it's been picked up by all these different groups of mega churches and like new apostles and reformers and stuff, who basically try to quote unquote take the mountain, right? And they try to go to these different, like the government, for instance, and to Christianize it. So there's this huge surge of this activity right now, and the question is like, well, when you Christianize the government, is it going to like increase the space for pluralism?
But if you believe if you believe Jesus should be king, though, maybe that makes sense.
That's actually the thing. Mixing up Jesus's victory with your own political victory has led things, and I am. Well, I would think
people would say it's not their own political victory. They're genuinely trying to restore their idea of ultimate truth and ultimate power, and truth and power are completely one and the same.
When they get crucified, I'll say that they did a good job. People who chase after power and money tend not to be the ones who are like held in high esteem in the New Testament. That's just looking from a...
No, but they're held in high esteem in our country, regardless of whether you're on the right or the left.
But they're trying to restore like a Christological dominion and Christological reign. They believe that we shouldn't have a monarch. We shouldn't even elevate the president of the United States. Like Jesus should be king of the country and the world.
Rome 250.
So if that's your schema,
Rome 250 ACE, right? Like before that, there wasn't that. You know what I mean? Like Christ as king wasn't like, it didn't mean that for the early Christians. They were this persecuted subset. It's a totally different way of envisioning the Christian mission.
Yeah, it is.
Because the Christ of the New Testament did not use government or military or stuff like that to take power. That's the whole point. Like the whole point is like a rejection of that. Mm-hmm.
Turn the other cheek.
Yes. Yeah.
Kill
for
and
real.
be killed instead of kill.
Yeah. It definitely is.
And it's so funny. Like, if I can just say an aside, like, I think it's funny that the religious right is really afraid of persecution when persecution is exactly what grew the church to be what it is today.
That's true.
These stories of persecution and being under the gun, so to speak,
it galvanizes
is religious
witness.
Power. So why wouldn't you want to be persecuted? I don't know. It doesn't make sense. But I think maybe what this conversation's coming down to me and Alan, as you're talking about, you said a few minutes ago, a concept of, truth can stand by itself. Truth is ultimate, regardless of our current interpretations or whatever. I think the difference maybe for me boils down between the religious right and the religious left currently in our country. The religious right believe truth and power should be melded and actualized in societal systems. And the left believes that truth and power should be separated for the sake of both. And that dominionism is dangerous both to the country and to the religion, because it changes the agenda of the religion. It waters down its fiber of love and neighborliness and turning the other cheek, and it opens the door for manipulative, abusive people to come in and take control. It creates a power vacuum, really, if you have those things welded together.
And the case study that I mentioned before, I'm going to bring it up again. We're going to link an article in the description about Nazi Germany was a Christian nation. You just have to look at how the church was co-opted by the fascist elements. It was ready for it because it didn't have the Christianity of Germany was too easily co-opted by like those elements. And that's what you're talking about, is that it leaves that power vacuum. There's no tension. There's no pushback. And
there's no prophetic witness left anymore
right.
if the church is completely melded with the government. And that's Germany's a great example.
It really is.
The Archbishop of the Lutheran Church in Germany, when the Nazis rose to power, there was such a nationalistic push because Germany had been decimated after World War I. There was so much widespread poverty. That was like the comeback tour of, the Nazi Party was going to establish Germany as a world superpower and things like that. So the Archbishop of the Lutheran Church is famously quoted as saying, "We're not now called to be Christians, but to be Nazis, but to be politicians. We're supposed to establish this new Jerusalem of the Nazi Party on earth." And this is why people like Dietrich Bonhoeffer were so famous for resisting that prophetically. They were famous for resisting the church, theocracy, the Christianized state, because they saw where it was headed to this scary absolutist place that ended up with the death of 6 million Jews in concentration camps. So Bonhoeffer, people remember his like nice writings about grace. Bonhoeffer freaking tried to kill Hitler, like actively tried to kill him, and then died in a concentration camp because he was a political extremist against the church and the state.
The problem. So the article that I want to link is that when the Nazi Party was quote unquote good for the church, that's the platform that they ran on. They had signs, they had meetings, speeches, that it's like, let's make Germany great again. And that includes, we're going to start praying again, right? like all the language we've heard. And it basically made the church public, sang hymns, did all sorts of stuff. But what that does is it made the church nationalistic. And so it actually, like, you had the Nazi flag in churches. Church after church after church after church. Wow, that's so awful. I can't imagine a church with a Nazi flag. Well, are there flags in your in your church right now? Like, what kind of resistance do you have to the control of your society? And
or
so
like the Pledge of Allegiance, right, is a function of nationalism. The Pledge of Allegiance didn't go back to the Founding Fathers. It was established in the 50s out of McCarthy-era fear of communist godlessness. So they started having all the kids recite this pledge to boost nationalist experience. Did you know? This is fascinating. I just found this out. The metric system did not get adopted into the U.S. because early theologians in the middle of the 1800s started pushing back and saying that the inch is actually a closer measurement to God, and it's like a biblical measurement. So if we don't adopt the metric system, we're going to lose our theological values.
If we do adopt the metric system,
if
then
we
it
do
will,
adopt,
right?
If we lose the inch and
I
the
agree.
foot.
Those scientists they may have said they were Christians, but heck no, dude. They argued against They argued for heliocentrism. The Earth is not the center of the universe. How unchristian can you get?
And so now we have this wonky, crazy. I was listening to this podcast. It's on 99% Invisible. We'll put a link in the show notes. It was really fascinating. I think this goes to show you how deeply rooted our ideas of Christian dominance are without us even knowing it. There was a science teacher in New Jersey, I believe, went to a public place, I think it was an airport, and she saw that there was a sign that had a temperature reading in Fahrenheit, but the Celsius hadn't been activated yet. So she contacted the airport and said, hey, can you turn the Celsius on? Because, she's a chemistry teacher. She wants to improve general public comfortability with the metric system because the rest of the world uses it. The whole scientific community in the US uses it. And it's just a generally good thing. The local paper caught wind of this and they ran a little story on her. She started getting threats on Facebook and in the mail. She started getting all these people just throwing mad shade, not even because she wanted to get rid of the Fahrenheit and the US system. She just wanted to also include the metric system. People were so angry at her and not even realizing that this is like in our religious, our collective national religious imagination, that there are closer ways to God to doing certain things. That's Christian hegemony at work. Even if you're not a Christian and you get mad about that, that means that you're still susceptible to Christian hegemony.
That's awesome.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, I did not know that.
So now this woman's a huge advocate for like, okay, screw this. We are not an ignorant country. This is just pure ignorance, and I will not stand for it anymore. This is ridiculous. Like, she's becoming an activist for the metric system because of what it means to her. So
an inch is an inch. And she's doing her work.
So anyway, so when I'm thinking about Christian hegemony, I think it's easy. It's great to me to use Foucault, and Foucault's a really dense French philosopher in the 70s and 80s. He writes a lot about power and sexuality, but it's interesting to think about power as not being a set thing. He said power is everywhere and comes from everywhere. We're all responsible for kind of co-creating power. It's not something that comes from the top down or the bottom up, but it comes from everywhere. And this is an interesting quote from him, Foucault and Rabineau. Each society has its regime of truth, he calls it. And I think that's a really helpful phrase, the regime of truth. It's general politics of truth. That is, the types of discourse which it accepts and makes function as true, the mechanisms and instances which enable one to distinguish true and false statements, the means by which each is sanctioned, the techniques and procedures according value and the acquisition of truth, and the status of those who are charged with saying what counts as true. So thinking about who gets to decide what's true in common sense is really important, especially today when there is an all-out war against media and free expression, and a huge push against what is quote unquote fake news. Because if you can discredit multiplicity of voice and centralize what is true and who gets to decide what is true, you've created a deeper hegemony and a deeper hegemonic structure that excludes people and takes away their voice and makes them invisible and takes them out of that collective power. So if you care about democracy, you will want multiplicity. And I say that knowing that the left has been I think part of the reason we've had the political turmoil that we've had is because the left in the last decade or two has gotten into this horrifying cycle of shaming right-wing people and shutting them down in a really shameful way. And I think the left is complicit in the mess that we all find ourselves in. And I've heard this over and over again from my friends and family who are in conservative circles, that they feel completely shut down and shut out of the conversation. So instead of shutting people down, engage them, debate them, treat them with dignity, and we can start to heal our collective wounds. Because even if you are rainbow flag waving socialist commie hippie, if you shut down people who differ from you, then you're no better than the hegemonic people that you're criticizing.
Maybe slightly better, but not much.
We have to get back to discourse, right? We have
do.
to get back to debate and common decency. We have to, otherwise we're
having
screwed.
more than two people to vote for. Having a plurality of ideas that really well express different positions rather than these caricatures of truth that we've created. Yeah, I'm down for that. One thing I want to say real fast, just from the like religious side or the, my biblical study side, is that just the life of Jesus and the tradition of Jesus resists ideas of hegemony. Every time you see it, Christianity co-opted in a way that takes over power, like in government, it gets really far away from the actual person and words of Jesus. So I think it resists that.
And I think the left gets a rap for like loving Jesus less or being less moral because they're not always talking about Jesus. But that's a really concerted effort to be pluralistic and exist in a pluralistic society and have a public theology that respects other ways of life and other religious traditions or no religious tradition. So I think it's so funny that like in my family, I get pegged as like not caring about faith. And it's like, just because I don't talk about it doesn't mean I don't care about it. I'm just trying to be respectful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You see that in leftist politics a lot. Yeah, like this whole idea that Obama was never a Christian, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's
well, I think
ridiculous.
part of the problem is that, again, going back to that, certain people have narrowly defined what Christian is. And I think that that's part of the problem. If we're experiencing any kind of what we want to call truth, whether it's love, justice, connection with someone else, is don't ascribe a religious label to it. Just call it what it is and allow us to rest in that and find our common place there. And that's part of the problem, is that love is not exclusively Christian. Even the teachings of Jesus, quite honestly, they're not original. They're coming from another rabbi within the Jewish context that are expand. It's just the regular flow of ideas as someone comes along and puts it in a context that really captures people, and we move from there. So let's stop cornering any one truth or any one way to our religion and just say this is what it is and we can all share into it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think along those lines, if I can just say one more thought, I think that I'll use an example from my own personal life. When I left my faith of origin, the faith that I inherited, I felt like I inherited this vault, right? Like we all inherit a vault. And from our parents, from our community, from our faith, or whatever our nation, we inherit a vault of things. And inside that vault, there's like treasures and trash, And I think it's every person is incumbent upon them to go through that vault at some point in your adult life and clear out and decide what's treasure and what's trash. And I feel like what I did is went through that process of kind of clearing like almost everything out and saying, I want to start over. But I haven't really filled that vault with new treasures of my own. Like I haven't really started to decide in a constructive way, or maybe I'm doing that now, what is I actually do value. Like it's just not enough to just be against something. It's not enough to continually deconstruct and criticize what's going on in the world. You have to build a better way. And I think that, if for those of us who care about progressive Christian imagination, it would behoove us, I think, to really start talking about what we do prize, what we do treasure, and what we do want to see come to pass. And I think in that way, we start creating a common language with people from other faiths about, what are our universal values? What does it look like? How do we imagine that? How do we co-create it?
Right.
Instead of just being negative all the time, because it's exhausting.
And I think that's an entirely new episode at some point to talk about different things in that direction. I love it.
I don't even know how to do it. I don't even know if we could fill an hour. I'm sure we could. But.
Well, for everybody's journey is a little bit different. For some, it takes longer. There's more trash to throw away, or maybe it's harder to open the vault, all those different things. And I think that going out into the desert and getting clear of all that and throwing it away is actually the work of faith. That's from my perspective. But I think that it's on all of us, Christian or not,
And I don't think anyone on this show has a problem filling an hour of time just by ourselves. So I think we'll be good. Let us know what you think. To add your voice to this particular conversation, you can comment in the show notes at IRENCAST.com/110. Also in the show notes, you'll find relevant links and a complete list of all the other ways you can like, follow, and contact the show. That's IRENCAST.com/110. On the other side of the music, we are going to be playing a little round of Pursuit of the Trivial and catching up with Mona. So we haven't played this particular game, Pursuit of the Trivial, since way back in episode 34. And for those of you that may be joining us for the first time, we probably didn't do a proper introduction and letting you know that Mona has been a long-time founder, co-host of the show for 100 episodes on, and it wasn't until our recent hiatus and comeback that she's stepped away from being a regular host. But this is her first official episode back since her hiatus. So we thought
I'm bringing sexy back. I can't finish that.
And she's already singing sexy back. Oh my gosh. What happened to you?
Nobody knows. I've been playing music. That's what happened.
That's right.
So for this particular segment, we have all come up with we call it a Seinfeld type argument, a meaningless thing that maybe we're probably overly passionate about. And then we're going to discuss and hopefully argue a little bit. And then we'll spend some time catching up with Mona, find out how things are going. So Mona, let's start with you. What are you going to bring to the cage, the ring?
Ding, ding, ding. All right. Are you ready? I would like to know, what is the best French fry shape? I have a very strong opinion about this, but I'll let you go first.
I think it should be a fried potato in the shape of France.
Har, har, har.
No.
France is not a very exciting shape for.
And I prefer the term freedom fries as opposed to French fries. Just
Apropos. What do you think, Jeff?
I can tell you that for the most part, as long as it's long and skinny, then it is appropriate shape. And it all depends upon the person who is eating the French fry. If you aren't a fry dipper, then it doesn't matter the shape because you're just eating the fry.
Oh, I beg to differ.
If you are a dipper, then I think something with, ridges on it is helpful to pick up as much sauce, whatever your particular sauce is. The one thing that I am adamantly against, though, calling fries is crisp-cut fries. Yes.
How dare you?
Waffle fries.
Waffle fries are the best.
No, they're not fries. They're just potatoes.
Jeff, you're frying potatoes.
I feel that
They're
way
fries.
about ridges. I feel that way about ridges. I think that's no longer a fry. I think of cafeteria food.
You guys are too stringent here. Open up your mind.
Of soundproofing,
I certainly am not a fan of them, but I would still consider them fries. But crisp-cut fries are basically they're just sliced potatoes with holes punched in them.
Why is that not acceptable?
I didn't expect to kind of agree with you, Jeff.
You're still taking a potato and cutting it up and frying it.
I kind of agree with Jeff. I think the larger the fry, the closer to potato territory you get. So those really thick fries, really
all
big
fries
ones,
are potatoes, Alan.
Those aren't fries. Those are wedges.
They're not fries.
They're wedges.
They're wedges.
Right?
I agree.
Exactly.
I think I agree.
No,
I don't know what the perfect is, but I know what the
you
gross
bake
and
wedges.
non-fry
Okay,
is.
you bake wedges. You fry crisp-cut fries. You put it in a deep fryer.
But it's not a fry. It's just it's a waffle.
It's a fry. It's crisp-cut.
It's a small
Listen,
waffle.
I'll tell you why it's the best. But Alan, you go first. We'll return to this in a minute. Alan, defend your position.
Is a donut a fry?
No, because it's not made out of potatoes.
Oh, okay. If I dropped a potato inside of a fryer and pulled it out, would it be a fry?
No, you have to cut it. It has to be cut at some point.
If I cut a potato in two and I dropped it in a fryer and gave it to you, would I say these are fries?
It wouldn't taste good because the middle wouldn't cook properly.
But first,
yes.
You would say they're fries. So
yes,
then there's nothing for us to talk about because
it would be a very large fry. It would be a very large fry.
Mona, if we were talking about the Bible right now, you would be the conservative because you'd be very literal.
No, you guys would, because you're being exclusive of me.
No, we're taking what the cultural meaning of fry has come to mean, which is a long, skinny piece of potato that goes with your burger, not just any potato fry.
Okay, so if I go to a fast food restaurant, let me ask you this: if I go to a restaurant and I see on the menu waffle fill in the blanks, what does it say there?
They could be wrong.
It could be. It's mislabeled.
You don't just order. If you order waffles,
restaurants
you get something made out of bread.
Restaurants.
If you order waffle fries, it's a French fry category. Okay, let me tell you why it's the best.
Just because someone opens up a business doesn't mean that they're an expert.
I'm under fire here, so I feel like I need to defend it. Listen, if you're going for taste factor, the ratio of surface area of the potato to the interior of the potato is the greatest maximization of surface area, so it's the best flavor.
It's a chip fry. I mean, so it's a chip with holes in it. It's not a fry. It's a chip.
But you're frying it in a... Okay,
you're
Alan,
frying
you go
chips.
next.
You're frying
we'll
chips.
Come back to this.
It's sliced potatoes. You're frying chips.
Say,
but those are very thin.
According to your definition, you would say strings, like little potato strings, are actually the best because they have the largest surface area that's fried. So you might be...
but the texture to me is not as gratifying as like biting into a chewy, big waffle fry. But potato shoestring fries are second for me. So yes, I'm consistent.
I think somewhere in the middle between those two is the golden ratio.
The golden French fry?
The golden French fry ratio.
Okay.
That'd be interesting. Wow, thank you for giving me an opinion that I never had before. Now I feel pretty strongly about it.
I freaking love debating. I don't know why I wasn't a lawyer.
Okay,
probably because I don't like contracts.
I have two, but they're both related. And I don't know if I can just go back to back or if I have to wait or something.
Well, we're just doing one each. We don't want to be here forever.
Okay, well, I just want to do these two real fast. Okay,
I just lump them together.
Both have to do with the gym. First is it ever appropriate to approach someone at the gym to hit on them? Like, even if it's like super casual or whatever, or not, if you're interested in someone, is it ever appropriate to approach them? Yes or no?
I think it's appropriate. Honestly, from being a female in workout spaces, like I hate them for that reason. I feel like I'm being watched all the time. I think it's perfectly appropriate to approach someone as a friend, but no, I don't think it's appropriate to hit on them because that's their space. They're paying to be there. They're working out. They're living
What if you're
their life.
attracted to them and you're approaching them by a friend that you're attracted to?
Then be friends with someone who's attractive. It's not the end of the world. You can.
But you're talking to gym bros. There is no
gym bros need
a friend.
So basically what you're really asking, is there any social justification for gym bros? And I would say no, there's not.
No. I think you have Neanderthal level social skills at that point, then you need a lot of help. And I think that's not your biggest problem, is whether or not to approach a
Okay, so if you think
gym.
someone who's attractive, is it ever okay to talk to them in the gym? And
talk to them? To be their friend,
to approach them and interrupt their workout, their day or whatever.
But you have to honor the context. You have to honor the context.
I wouldn't interrupt them. I would catch them as they're leaving.
Right.
You would wait in the bushes and catch them as they're leaving?
Yeah, with crazy. A big butterfly net. Human size.
I think you absolutely have to honor the context, in the sense that if something natural within the way that the gym flows, like if I'm moving from one machine to another and I'm waiting for someone on a machine that I want next, and conversation happens through like a polite exchange within the context of the gym, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But as far as interruption and approach,
yeah, but you could like air quote like
purpose,
wait for that equipment.
Okay, but so you're not talking to just anyone, you're talking to them because you find them attractive. Is that wrong? Because it's appropriate in real life, but in the gym, that's the gym. You know what I mean?
Right. That's their space. They're in the zone. I said, leave them alone. Catch them.
I would agree
say catch them at the end of the workout. Put a group thing together. We're, a bunch of us are going out for drinks. Would you like to come? Like, there's not only one way to do this.
Yeah.
And remind yourself that notion that there's one person for you in the world is false, and find someone somewhere else.
I know, right?
See, and I would think so in a lot of cases, like one time there was somebody who came up to me and was like, this was like the only thing that's approached like not a catcall as far as attention from the outside, like the opposite gender. This gentleman came up to me and he was like, I just want to let you know, I think you're really beautiful. Have a wonderful day. I don't want anything from you. Just know that someone thinks that. I mean, I thought that was really flattering. Maybe some women would not be comfortable with that, but I think it's a nice thing. But in the gym, then that you're saying, then you're basically funny, telling someone that you've been watching them. So
right, of course.
That approaches cookie territory, even
agree.
if you do it in a gentlemanly fashion.
I think the gym is a sacred space. You can't do that.
I think you shouldn't do it.
I think I've arrived at that. Total side note, second one. How long do you have to wait for someone who's on a bench or a machine while they're just sitting there texting and using their phone? How long should you wait until you ask, how many sets do you have left? Or just like politely, like, hey, how many can you ever ask someone that? And how long should you have to wait? Because like sometimes there'll be this bench, someone's been sitting there, they've been texting on their phone, and I'll just come up to them and be like, hey, how many sets do you have left? And they'll tell me, oh, I have 3, or I have 2. There should be
written rules of gym
There is,
etiquette.
but nobody listens to them. So internally, do you ever approach someone and talk to them? Or
but I'm kind of a biatch, so I don't care what people think of me. I don't have any problem approaching someone.
So
about
you won't wait 1 second. You'll walk right up to them if they're on their phone and be like, "Hey, how many sets do you have left?"
Oh, exactly. I wouldn't even hesitate.
Okay. What about you, Jeff?
Well, personally, I would never do that just because I wouldn't be in the gym long enough, and it would be a perfect excuse not to do that particular exercise if someone else is using it. But in a hypothetical scenario, if I was in that mode, no, I wouldn't do that. I don't know. It just seems, unless it was like excessive, if the person was just sitting there texting
excessive? Yeah.
way overboard. I don't know if there'd be
15
I
minutes?
think of it as a public service. They're not supposed to be texting. They're supposed to be working out. You're helping them get back on track.
So 15 minutes, Jeff, is that excessive? If someone's sitting on the bench for 15 minutes and hasn't used it?
Honestly, it would depend upon how impatient I'm being, but I don't think that would be. I think it would be more inappropriate the way that you ask. Like, just a peek over and say, "Hey, just wondering real quick." That seems nice and doesn't seem out of context at all if it was 1 minute or 10 minutes. But if I'm like, "Hey, what are you doing? Hurry up. How much longer do you have?" So to me, I don't know. It doesn't really matter all that much as long as you're saying it nicely.
I think after 15 minutes, it's socially acceptable to walk up to them, take their phone, scream in their face, move your ass, and throw their phone into the garbage.
So my rule is like 2.5 minutes. I actually like set my watch sometimes because someone may be doing a set.
What?
Someone may be doing
Alan,
a
this
set.
Is a level
Someone
of
may be
nerdy
doing a set, and I don't want to interrupt them at all. Like the gym is my holy time. I work with people all day long. I like go through emotions and stuff. The gym is my castle where I don't have to speak to a soul. I don't have to look at anyone. Right? I stare.
That's
at the
why
wall.
I love living in
God,
New
I love it
England
so
in
much.
general.
No,
everywhere is
life
like
is
that.
wonderful. That's just the one place it has to happen. And so if after 2.5 minutes they're still on their phone, I'm like, okay, they're no longer waiting for their set to kind of, their rest period. They're now kind of getting into the hey, how many sets do you have left range?
I
So
think
for me,
you're
it's 2.5
overthinking
minutes.
it. I think you should just, if you
I don't
feel
think
like
people
you should
think
talk
about
to them, you
etiquette
should talk
enough.
to them.
Hey, Mona,
You might make a friend in the process.
people don't think about etiquette enough in the gym. Yes or no?
I don't know. I don't really like. I go to the gym to box and do yoga, and then otherwise I avoid it like the plague. Because I'm like Jeff. I think it's a horrible place. What's yours, Jeff?
All right. Well, I guess mine is more not necessarily to spark debate, but to gauge my own lack of balance in a particular area. And I'm going to say in the car, I know that I have a tendency, I'm sure both of you have driven with me at one point in time, but I have a tendency to be a little aggressive behind the wheel.
You?
Yes. I've been in the car
so
many times
shocked.
throughout my adolescence when you were driving. Late adolescence in my 20s.
I'm just very passionate about certain etiquette and rules in the road. And when people violate those things, I've taken it upon myself to be their teacher in whatever way possible.
Okay. What's the question?
The birth of
Specifically, I have a question regarding your horn. When to use it, how often you should use it, and whether, because it seems to me that the horn itself, you can't express any kind of like tone when you honk your horn. It's always going to come off as mean to the other person. Like, why'd you honk at me? All that kind of stuff. So
I lament that on
where
a
you
daily
live.
basis, Jeff, by the way. I wish there was like 4 different settings, like beep, like hey.
Right. Yeah. Like, give us some emphasis. Because
A nice
there's
horn and a mean horn. Yeah.
Right. So when do you use your horn? How do you use your horn? Is your horn a way of being polite or instructive? Is it appropriate to use it in anger, to express that anger? For instance, like to me, one of the polite ways to use your horn is at a stoplight. If someone hasn't seen that it's turned green, you honk your horn.
Because they're texting like a moron.
You
Well,
tap
they
it.
deserve the angry horn. Like, pay the
No,
frick
they
attention.
don't.
You're driving
It's the
vehicle
new
that could
world
kill
we live
someone.
in. It's the new world we live in. The car's not moving. So someone's texting. I whatever. Everyone has a phone. They're not
What?
moving. They're not going to kill anyone. They're just sitting there.
If they're not
So-
moving the car.
So you wouldn't
Okay.
honk your horn in that situation?
I do.
Okay.
A tiny little tap. I go beep, and I drive a Prius, so it sounds cute. But like people in my family will, if someone cuts you off, they honk for a good 15 seconds. It's like to let that person know, and all of the generations that come after them, that they had done something wrong.
Well, Alan, due to my personal experience, I tend to honk a little bit longer with people from your Prius tribe because most of my experiences on the road with bad drivers, someone inevitably is driving a Prius. No offense to my Prius drivers out there.
I'm a former Prius owner myself. Okay, this depends on where you live. It's totally regional because when I first moved to New England, I was driving through Boston, and the first time someone like honked at me because Boston's like, the roads are like actually laid out on old cow paths. So the city's designed by cow logic, actually. And the roads are wonky. There's like 6-way intersections and everything's a one-way street, and nothing goes at a right angle. So it's like a really stressful place to drive. And the first time I drove and I didn't even know I was doing wrong, but I got honked at, I actually cried because I wasn't used to honking as a thing. But out here, it's much more instructional. It's much more in the, hey, heads up thing. It's, or people honk. It drives me crazy when people honk when they get stuck in traffic. It's like, come on, buddy. Nobody's going anywhere. Honking is really not going to fix the situation.
Hey, by
You're
the
just
way,
being an ass.
Let me explode your mind. You're never stuck in traffic. You are traffic.
Whoa.
Boom.
That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life.
You are the traffic, dude. Like, you're the one that's causing the problem.
You are
No,
the
you're
problem.
not. No, you're not.
No,
Because
you're not.
you are the victim of someone else's stupidity who's actually causing the traffic about 10 cars ahead of you. And when you pass
Changing
them,
lanes
it is
too
your
much.
job to honk at them to continue the further embarrassment that they have for something that they did
I
that
agree
was
with
stupid.
Mona that people who honk when they're stuck in traffic are the funniest strain of humanity on the planet.
Yeah, I
agree with that.
I think it's
I can't
hilarious.
believe
You're not
that
doing
happens.
anything. You're not
But
doing
once you
anything
get to the
constructive.
front of that traffic and you realize that the person who caused that traffic is doing something stupid, then I say all bets are off and you honk at
They're
them and
not
let them
always
know
doing
that.
something stupid. Sometimes, like a little old lady's crossing the road, or someone hit a deer, or
But
they
that's
broke
not stupid.
down,
That's
or-
not
Yep,
stupid. I'm
sometimes
just
it's
talking
never
about
safe in
someone
front.
who,
Right.
like,
Someone has a seizure while they're driving a car and you're angry at them because they're having
There's-
this, like, there's a
there's
billion
so
things that
many
can happen and you're
reasons
so
that could
angry
go
at them. And
wrong.
it's like, good Lord.
Or
dude.
someone's people changing lanes. That's like just about the only stupid thing people do that causes traffic. It
Right.
doesn't even cause that much traffic.
That is not true.
So,
People cause
does
traffic
cause a lot
for
of traffic.
much
Doing what?
Lane
dumber
changes.
and more
Look
purposeful
up
things.
the YouTube videos on lane changes, the mechanics, the way it works. If you cut someone off, it actually causes like huge traffic down the line. Anyway, so I'm going to go with something, Jeff. I've arrived at my opinion. I think it is you always use the polite beep no matter what. Even if someone cuts you off, someone puts you in danger, you're letting that person know that they did wrong. You just honk it once. You don't lay on it because it doesn't add to the instruction. You're not shaming them. They already know they did something wrong because you honked. So a little beep, unless you're saving someone's life and they are not, they don't realize that something's going to hit them, and so you lay down on the horn. There's only one way to
I
honk
think we
the
should
horn.
advocate for car companies to give us multiple horn choices.
Right. Like ringtones for your car.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, they do have like custom horns or something.
No, there's only one. It should be one
No,
horn for
sometimes
every
people
car.
put in like, bah, 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 bah,
No,
like the
it should be
little
one
horn.
horn for every car.
No.
So that nobody's
That's not
surprised when you honk. Because sometimes it's very startling when someone honks and you may be driving and you're going to hit someone and you get scared and so you run someone over. I think there should be one car horn for every single thing, and everybody should only use it like a tap. That's
You're
it.
a horn authoritarian.
I am now.
A hornitarian.
Yeah, let's not.
Let's not use that again.
Let's not go
that was
down
a good
road.
segment. I like that. I specifically requested arguments about something asinine, like ridiculous arguments about something asinine. So I think we hit it on the head. We hit it
And
on
probably
the horn.
revealed a little bit too much about our own personalities in the process.
Not possible.
All right. Well, Mona, how are you? Catch us up a
Yo.
little bit. How can people, if you're not on this show on a regular basis, how can people find you? Are you doing something that you would like to let us know about?
Yes, I am. I am starting a band. Actually, a rock band.
With
That's
a
my new
super
thing.
cool
I mean,
name.
I've been a
I
musician for a
love
long
that.
time. And I've written songs for, like a decade. And recently, I don't know if it's like the political situation or just having a lot of like personal rage, but I've been writing more rock songs, hard rock, aggressive, songs about all kinds of things, but especially about social issues. And in the last 6 months or so, I started networking with some different musicians. I found a drummer that I love playing with, who's a transgender woman. And we just had this idea, this vision for the last 6 months, man, wouldn't it be cool to just have a really good all female rock band, just a really good, and not even to be super feministy, but just to have a rock band that happens to be all female musicians, because there's so many all male normative bands out there, and rock is really still pretty male dominant as an industry.
Yeah.
So we're dang. So we've been working on songs, and we started playing a little bit, and just before Christmas, we met our lead guitar player who introduced us to our bass player, and our lead guitar player actually teaches at there's a nonprofit in Boston called Girls Rock Camp, and they actually help girls and women through this self-empowerment team building exercise learn how to start bands. And so it's this big new push for women's empowerment to express yourself and perform and do this. So we've been playing together, and I got to tell you, it sounds incredible. I'm so excited. It's just amazing to surround myself with talented musicians and people I just love working with. And in the process of starting an originals band in particular is a super creative process, and it's a lot of work. But we're starting to plan making an EP. We don't really have any music released yet, so I'm sorry there's nothing you can really hear on Spotify.
I was
going to
ask, when can I start listening to you in the gym?
In a few months, we'll have something ready, and maybe I'll come back on the show if you'll so have me and talk about music, because I would love to just talk about.
You can play some of your music for us.
I would love to. Awesome. Yeah, I would love to. So that's been super exciting and a lot of ups and downs. But
so when you say rock band, what influence? What type of rock? What is your? You say you have a rhythm guitar and a lead guitar. That sounds like a great start to me. So what?
And a bass, yeah. We stylistically we sound a lot like early Black Sabbath, mixed with
nice.
some Black Keys, and what else would I say we sound like? Yeah, I would say it's kind of rootsy hard rock with heavy guitars, overdrive, but kind of vocals. I would say Jefferson Airplane-ish in that range.
Very
yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, so I'm the lead singer, and the band is called Yes Commander.
I don't think I've ever heard you really sing in that context. So I'm very excited to hear what is the result of your guys' band, or your ladies' band, sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, I've done a lot of jazz, and I was trained classical voice, so this is a different... And actually, I was at a music store recently looking for effects pedals that I could put on my voice. Because if I sing in a classic rock style, I'm going to shred my vocal cords, right? So I have to put other effects on the voice to just protect my instrument, because I still want to be able to sing jazz, when I'm older. So, figuring all this out has been fun, but it's also fun that there's really aren't that many bands that I can point to that were exactly alike. I think we're doing something original. And I think to me, the songs matter. I wrote a song about domestic violence. I wrote a song about rape culture, writing songs about, our current political moment, but in kind of this is going to sound weird, but in a catchy way, in a way that still kind of has pop sensibilities, So that's our whole thing, socially conscious music that you can dance to and really get into. So we'll see what happens, guys. I'm excited.
That sounds amazing.
Thanks. So that's really where, besides work, that's all my time's going to the band. And if you look up the band, you'll notice that I'm working under my real name, Mel Stanford. So don't be confused. It's still me, same person.
That's right. And if you want the full story on that, you can go back to our episode 100 at IRENCAST.com/100, where Mona talks about the use of Mona as her pseudonym for the show. So check that out, IRENCAST.com/100. Well, Mona, thank you so much for bringing to us this topic and coming back on the show. And, it's just like old times. I felt like we didn't miss a beat. It was just back into that groove, get into that conversation. Very, very fun.
Well, we're going on 15 years now of doing this kind of thing.
Right?
Oh, yeah. Not the podcast, but these conversations in general. I guess
the podcast.
Riding a bike.
We're a few weeks short of 3 years doing this.
What?
Yeah.
Hot
and before
damn.
that, we had a good decade, So we've been doing it for 12
of just
years.
Being friends.
Talking in depth for hours on end as friends and
Talking real good.
conversation partners.
Yeah. Well, you guys are the best. I have to say, just thanks for the work you keep doing. You know, sometimes Jeff forwards me emails from fans that it's just these really remarkable in-depth, like people telling us their stories and what this podcast has meant to a lot of people. And I just have to say, like, Jeff and Alan, both of you are just, thank you for continuing this work. I'm sorry I can't be involved all the time anymore, but it's awesome to come back on the show and just, man, keep it up. You guys are doing amazing stuff in the world, and I'm excited to see what happens next.
Very cool.
That's right. Well, that will do it for us this week. Alan, how can people find what you got going on the interwebs?
Always Facebook. Go ahead and look me up. Alan, Allenob. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, everything else. Lately, I've been doing a lot of work on immigration justice and ICE stuff. I'm spearheading a group that is going to put on workshops for different city councils and government organizations and churches and all kinds of things, working on ending the isolation that's created by current practices with ICE detainees. So I spend a lot of my time working on that and actually going to the local detention center. And it's just a very dehumanizing experience for everyone visiting, for everyone involved. And there are a bunch of legal things. So I've been getting more heavily involved in that on the side. And that's going to be probably an episode toward the future. But, I'm now writing again a lot more. So if you want to go to anirenicon.com.
Or you can go to IRENCAST.com and click on the blog at the top.
Yeah. I have been putting up, just for a long time, I've been journaling kind of contemplative Christian stuff, which is very different than doing theology or biblical studies. And so lately I've been kind of crafting them and uploading them to the website. So if that's interesting to you, contemplative mystic Christianity, go check it out. It's something I'm going to be doing more and more of.
Nice. As for me, you can follow me on all the socials at Jeff Manildi. And also on the second and fourth Thursday of every month, you can listen to my other podcast, Divine Cinema, that I do with Dylan and Adam, where we talk about movies with themes of faith. As for IRENCAST, if you enjoy what we do here, recommend it to a friend or leave a rating and review for us on whatever podcasting platform you're listening on. We would really appreciate it. Or take your support of the show to the next level and consider going to IRENCAST.com/Amazon before you make your next purchase, and just shop as usual. By using that link, we'll receive a small percentage of your purchase without any extra cost to you. That'll help us a little in covering some of the costs associated with running the podcast. That's IRENCAST.com/Amazon. So for this week, I'm Jeff.
I'm Mona.
I waited for you. I'm Alan. Oh, that's feels so good.
You guys.
Thanks for joining the conversation.